Thank you everyone for joining us tonight. I am Jen Epstein from Riverkeeper, and I have the honor of introducing tonight's event. But you'll notice that there are three of us who are sharing hosting duties. So you're also going to be hearing from Christian Murphy from Bronx River Alliance and Katie Lamboy from Sarah Lawrence College Center for the Urban River at BZAC, which I will gratefully from now on call CURB. Tonight's event was organized by the Lower Hudson Partnership, which is an informal group of organizations working together on water quality monitoring and outreach in the Lower Hudson region. And the core of that group is CURB and Riverkeeper and the Bronx River Alliance, but many other organizations have been involved, including Groundwork Hudson Valley, the Pecanico River Watershed Alliance, Sparkhill Creek Watershed Alliance, and Pace University, to name some of them. So the central project of the Lower Hudson Partnership has been to monitor local rivers and streams for sewage contamination. And we want to start off by thanking our funders for helping us to do that: the Westchester Community Foundation, New York State Department of Environmental Conservation's Office of Environmental Justice, Patagonia, and the Rosenthal Foundation, the Snyder Foundation, and the Sunhill Foundation. So through that work, we have learned and we have shown that our waterways are polluted by sewage. And we're going to drop a link in the chat box. We encourage you to bookmark that and look later if you're not familiar with the water quality monitoring program, because that will bring you to our reports. We have reports for each of the tributaries in the Westchester area that we sample. So through the work, the water quality monitoring work, we all have a common cause. We go out the same time, on the same day, a couple times during the month, but we all do our jobs in different locations, and the end of the season is a unique time when we can usually get together in one place. And so we do that each fall. We get together in person, we celebrate the close of the season and all the work, share appreciation for everybody's work. This season, because of COVID, we were not able to conduct our regular sampling season, unfortunately. But we are still a community, and we wanted to bring everyone together to mark this time of year, as we usually do. So to those here who may be unfamiliar with the water quality monitoring program, we welcome you too, and we are glad to have you here. We know that many of you who are here tonight are involved with other projects and other work that our organizations do. And I'm excited that through this different kind of setting and platform, we have the opportunity to expand our circle. If everything's brand new to you, that's great too. Welcome. So at times with our monitoring program, it can feel like we are collecting so much data and doing a lot to document conditions and problems, but we run into obstacles when it comes to enacting change. Because these are complex problems and there aren't any silver bullets. So at last year's gathering, we used the time as a group to delve into ways to overcome those barriers. And one of the things we found was that many people are very active in their communities, but still a central question that emerged is how specifically can we as community members connect with local governments to enact change. So today we've brought together a group of people who are going to help us speak to that and who are going to help educate us and inform us about that. We measure sewage contamination. That's a big part of the problem with our waters, but we also know that stormwater pollution is a problem too. So today we're focusing on green infrastructure, which is the use of natural processes that occur in vegetation and soil to restore healthier water cycles in urbanized areas. And this is in contrast to the gray infrastructure, which is the pavement, the pipes, the gutters, the catch basins, and the outfalls that go into the rivers. So in terms of tonight's agenda, we are going to hear from the brewers first, who have made the beers that we are featuring tonight. And then we are going to have a toast to our sampling community. We invite everyone to raise a glass of whatever it is you've decided to bring, whatever refreshment you have tonight. And then after that, we are going to show portions of 2 films. And then we're going to talk to our 4 guests about how we can make green infrastructure practices happen at home. So I'm going to do full detailed introductions later when we get into the panel, but I do want to start by introducing our panelists briefly and thanking them for being here. So we're joined by Oded Holzinger, the Rivers and Trails Program Manager at Groundwork Hudson Valley, by MaryJane Shimsky, Westchester County Legislator for the 12th District, by Rebecca Pryor, Program Coordinator with Riverkeeper and the Guardians of Flushing Bay, and Emily Vail, Executive Director of the Hudson River Watershed Alliance. So thank you all again for your time tonight, and we're really looking forward to having an interesting discussion. If anyone has any questions at any time while we're going through the event, please put them into the Q&A box. Michelle Lubke from the Bronx River Alliance is monitoring. She's answering questions. And we're going to take some of those questions during the panel discussion. So as they arise, go ahead, type them in. Don't have to hold on to them. Michelle will pass them along. If you haven't already done it, put your Zoom window into full screen. Jen Benson is behind the scenes running the Zoom show, and she's going to control the view for you so that you see who you need to see as we move along. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Brad Nagel from Gun Hill Brewery, who's going to kick us off by introducing the first beer.
All right. Hey guys, how are you all? I hope everyone's doing all right. So we brewed a beer recently called Wet Ass Hops. It's backwards. I couldn't get my computer Zoom working. I don't work from home. I have to go to the brewery every day. So I'm currently on my phone, so it's a little bit weird for me. But anyway, Wet Ass Hops. It's named for one of our borough's greatest products, Cardi B. Her song WAP, which you may or may not have heard. If you have, great. If you have not, you should go out and listen to it after you drink this beer. So anyway, this beer is dry hopped, wet hop, Farmhouse Pale Ale. Dry hopped meaning there were hops added after it was brewed. Wet hop meaning the hops that we used were literally harvested the day that we brewed the beer, and didn't go through the normal drying and curing process that hops normally go through. So all of the ingredients are from the Hudson Valley, which is cool, I think. And yeah, we used yeast from Norway, a Kvik yeast. So that's where the Farmhouse part comes in. Kvik means quick. It's a fast fermenting yeast. And anyway, so here we go. Let's drink this beer. I've never done a beer tasting before, so this is a new thing for me. So taste is obviously a pretty subjective thing. I always feel weird when I try to tell people what a beer should taste like. But to me, I don't know, I kind of get like a grape jelly notes, some bubble gum, and then like a weird kind of hop kick in the background. Yeah. This beer was I think it came out pretty well. I enjoy it. I hope you enjoy it too. I don't really know what else to say about it other than I hope you enjoy drinking it. Yeah. What else would you like me to talk about tonight?
That's great. Thank you. We've had a little behind the scenes mix up with who was coming on. So I'm sorry, Brad.
Yeah, no problem. I'm happy to talk about like the hops a little bit. I mean, I was a hop farmer before I was a brewer in the Hudson Valley. So this guy that we got the malt from, Dennis Nessel, it's Hudson Valley Malts from Germantown, New York. We have actually worked on beers before with the hops that I grew and the malt that he grew. So this was a really exciting project for me, just to be able to work with him again. Obviously I'm in a different capacity now. Now I'm a brewer. So it's a little different. But yeah, I don't know. It's a fun beer, fun name. I hope no one's offended by it, but I don't know. Kind of
No,
had
I
to go
think
for it.
it's good for it's good. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Like I said, I've
So-
never done one of these tastings before, and then the virtual aspect just makes it even makes it strange. But anyway, thanks.
Yeah, you did wonderful.
Thank you.
We're gonna there you are, Christian.
All right.
Thank you, Brad, so much. The beer is great. Tastes great. Thank you so much for introducing it.
Thank you. All right, I'm gonna sign off or stop video.
All right, we're gonna pass it over to our second brewery of the night, and I'm gonna pass it on to John Garrity.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? Thanks for tuning in. So tonight we're drinking the Clearwater Kolsch from Captain Lawrence Brewing, located in Elmsford. We love clear water and clean water. This beer you're drinking here tonight is about 95% water. So, you know, clean water and clean water initiatives are very important to us as a brewery. Something that's really cool about where we are, you know, we New Yorkers like to say that we have the best water in the world, and we certainly believe that here at Captain Lawrence. We don't have to treat our water at all. A lot of brewers do have to treat their water. You want a harder water that tends to be better for brewing, and we don't have to do that. The water comes in exactly the way we want it, with just the right amount of calcium, magnesium. I'm not a brewer, so Scott, our founder, gave me some tidbits on some of the water, but we made this beer as a tribute to the water that we all get to drink, and if you want to make good beer, you usually need good water to start off with. So with that, let's pour some Clearwater Kolsch. So this one comes in at 4.8% alcohol, one of the lightest beers we do. No BS, this is my favorite beer here at Captain Lawrence. I drink way more of this than anything else we make. I love it. I kind of like what Brad said, you know, I don't like telling people what to taste, but I can tell you what I taste and smell. So, like I said, it's lighter. I get, you know, some crispness on the back end. To me, it almost has kind of a lemony flavor. We're using Columbus hops, which those tend to have kind of a lemony aroma. We're using crystal hops as well, so you get some floral notes from that. Touch of spice, and then just a really nice roasty sweetness from the malts. And like I said, that good clean water. We couldn't make this beer without it. Just a little bit about the style, Kolsch's. They started in Cologne, Germany in the 1600s, so this beer's been around forever. It's one of the first beers that looked clear. It's the lightest style ale you can make, so it's made similar to a lager, but using an ale yeast. So it likes to ferment it at slightly colder temperatures than what you would do for a typical ale. Yeah, like I said, clean water. We appreciate everything that everyone here is doing to make that happen. Yeah, a little bit about Captain Lawrence. We're in Elmsford and now opened a location in Mount Kisco. We're open for pickup and takeout, or come visit us at the beer garden. Hopefully the weather is nice for a few more weekends. Yeah, we just appreciate all the support we've gotten here locally. It's where we sell most of our beer, even though we are up and down the East Coast. The lower Hudson Valley and New York City is very important to us. So we appreciate the support during everything that's going on.
Thank you so much, John and Brad, for being here with us. And I would like to propose a toast if all of our panelists and our MCs can put on our cameras. All right, here we go. The shared experience of 2020 has shifted our conversations about how we live every day. Implementing our programs aimed to conserve our local waterways has posed a challenge. Yet we continue conversations to unite us in our shared vision for the Bronx, Pecanico, sawmill rivers, and our other local streams. In this shared experience, we have also all been called to protect each other during these incredibly uncertain times. It has given us the opportunity to reflect on our collective struggles and demand that we do better by propelling communities burdened by environmental inequality to the forefront of our conversations about the future of advocacy and community involvement. We have taken the strain of this year to reflect and strengthen our shared experience in this life. This year, we were unable to engage volunteers in sampling, yet their contribution to our efforts exceeded the bounds and confinements placed upon us by circumstance. They emailed us friendly hellos, participated in our virtual events, and even joined us for a virtual lunch date. Their drive continues to navigate our conversations as we work together with this community for the betterment of our world. Our samplers who have braved rainstorms and humid summers are the backbone of our Enterococcus sampling program. They do not just go out and collect samples by wading waterways and hauling buckets of water during the sampling season. Our stewards track the data of their beloved sites. They sit on committees within their towns. They share photos and concerns of suspicious field conditions even after the season is over. They are the voices of the rivers, and we could not have had success in conservation without them. And so I ask that we raise a drink to all of our local river protectors that have dedicated time and energy to advocating for healthier waterways throughout our communities. Cheers.
Cheers. To Pete Seeger.
I wish to introduce our first segment of the evening from the film Water Blues, Green Solutions. Communities across the country are looking to green infrastructure as a way to address the problems related to stormwater. We will take a closer look at the city of Philadelphia and its 25-year plan to convert impervious surfaces. By engaging homeowners, businesses, and community members, the city demonstrates strategies to ensure lasting co-benefits of their efforts.
Confronted with a major environmental problem that's caused by the rain. Even with as little as a quarter inch of rainfall, the city's combined sewer system can overflow into the Schuylkill and Delaware rivers, the sources of drinking water for Philadelphia.
Just had a significant rain event, and the boat is actively picking up the trash and debris. We collect waste, debris, and floatables on the river that occur during land runoff or through our infrastructure. And what you're seeing right now is the outfall of the Mill Creek combined sewer overflow. And what you're hearing right now is the pipe is in active discharge. Stormwater combined with sewage is flowing out of the pipe right now. 90% stormwater, around 10% sewage.
Like most older cities, Philadelphia has a combined sewer system throughout a large part of the city. Both sewage and stormwater flow into the same pipes. During dry weather, it's not a problem, but when it rains and a pipe fills capacity, electronic sensors are triggered. Sewage and stormwater containing pollutants from the streets are discharged into the river, violating the Federal Clean Water Act and generating millions of dollars in fines.
And EPA has been demanding of most cities that they build big tunnels, big tanks, big storage systems in order to be able to handle the additional flow from rainfall. The problem is they cost $8–10 billion, and we didn't have $8 to $10 billion. So we took a different attitude. We said, well, why don't we try to manage the water before it gets into the system? Every dollar we spend gets spent on the surface, creating a more sustainable city. We call it green infrastructure. Others call it green stormwater infrastructure. Whatever you call it, it's really about managing the rainwater and doing it in a way that gives some extra benefit back to the community.
On April 10, 2012, the leaders of the City of Philadelphia and the Federal Environmental Protection Agency announced an historic agreement. It allowed the city to institute Green City Clean Waters, a program to transform a third of the city's hard surfaces with green.
Hi everyone, we're having a minor technical difficulty, so it'll just be 1 quick minute until we resume. So I'm sorry for this interruption.
Green infrastructure as the primary solution to stop the polluting of its rivers.
Green City Clean Waters is our commitment to spend $2 billion over the next 25 years for these improvements. This will be the largest single investment of environmental dollars in the city for that time period. So this is the real deal.
Yes, thank you so much.
We signed this agreement with EPA. It was just a wonderful day, and what it left me with was, wow. We've finished our planning, we've finished our stakeholder involvement, bringing people together in partnership, and now we have to actually implement this thing. Portland was one of the first cities that we looked at as models for us. What I saw in Portland made me think about Philadelphia and that, yes, we can do this.
So I took the representatives from Philadelphia around the city and showed them these different projects. There were about a dozen or so at that time. And today we have thousands. I'm a landscape architect, and I worked for the city of Portland for 25 years. I got into landscape architecture because I just love this interaction between people and nature. We live in our cities and create these hard surfaces. When it rains, it doesn't soak into pavement, it runs off, and then it runs into the stormwater system and carries the pollutants. The landscape wasn't intended to take that water, so the idea was to change how we design things. So instead of having the landscape higher, make the landscape slightly lower than the pavement, and then let the water run off into the landscape. And then this runoff would soak into the ground. The plants would help make the ground more permeable. You'd get a lot of infiltration, so you'd recharge groundwater. Just do it opposite of how we have been doing it. Well, what if you don't have landscape? Or what if you have a building and that's all there is a building? And then it struck me, well, why not put the landscape on the roof? Would it manage stormwater? And I did that and tested it for 2 years on my little garage, and it worked.
We put green roofs on as many public buildings as we can. We have many now private developers putting green roofs on their buildings because there are demonstrated benefits to it. It holds the water, it evaporates some of that water back through the plant material into the atmosphere. So you're sort of mimicking nature.
Philadelphia appears to have said green infrastructure works, and let's use it in our plan to meet the requirements to solve our combined sewer overflow problem. And that's very impressive because they're the first city to do that.
Our goals are to place 10,000 greened acres around Philadelphia. That is a dramatic change. We're talking about doing it over a 25-year period. So this 5 years is really the experimental time. It's the time when we figure out what are the good designs for how you take water and infiltrate it into the ground.
As part of the Green City Clean Waters program, the Philadelphia Water Department is experimenting with an innovative approach to capturing stormwater on the properties of individual homeowners.
Yeah, come towards me.
We have a lot of residential customers in the city of Philadelphia, and we wanted them to be able to participate in Green City Clean Waters right in their own backyards. The goal of the program is to provide something that benefits them and helps the city of Philadelphia. And so through the program, the water department helps pay for the cost of installing stormwater management tools. So if the water from your front walk is running into the street, then that would be a good opportunity for us to do something. So I've been with the water department a year now, and I studied urban and environmental planning, and I was really interested in Green City Clean Waters. Philadelphia is leading the way there, and I wanted to be a part of that. Whatever shape you need.
The water department will reimburse up to a 6-foot long planter box. Okay. On this particular property, she has a couple of good options, one of which would be a rain garden in the front yard, which would be, a nice little landscaped space. It'll look great. It'll soak in a fair amount of stormwater.
So then you'll have part of your crew working here and part of them working on the downspout.
The piping work, yes.
We're actually putting water back into the earth. The way that this place is supposed to manage stormwater is by percolating it through the ground and returning it clean to our watersheds. And I think that's what's really innovative about our stormwater program here in Philadelphia. We're not digging up the streets. We're sort of letting the earth really manage the stormwater for Philadelphia.
It's really one drop at a time. We're helping educate homeowners on things that they can do, and we're trying to reduce runoff from every property where we can. So one house here, one house there, pretty soon you're talking real impact.
Providing incentives to homeowners is only one way to change how a city manages stormwater. The Philadelphia Water Department is also attempting to have a major impact on its commercial customers by instituting a new charge for stormwater.
So the more stormwater you send into our system, the more you should pay for that. How much land do you have and how much of it is impervious? And those two things determine how much your stormwater bill is going to be.
Newman Company is a paperboard manufacturing company. We take newspaper, corrugated, mixed office waste. We combine it in process, we clean it, we screen it, we refine it, we sheet it, we sell it to our customers, and they'll form it into a package. Water is the lifeblood of any paper mill. It is what facilitates manufacturing. We will be close to $700,000 next year for our water expense. It's a lot of money. The implementation of the stormwater charge really sent us over. That's when we realized that there are things that we can do that will save us money. The best motivator was hitting you in the wallet, and it was very effective. We explored ways that we could potentially implement surface water management strategies.
We constructed a drainage system to harvest the rainwater from the roof of this building. Now that water is conveyed to this storage tank here, about 30,000 gallon storage tank. The rainwater is harvested in that storage tank, is introduced into the paper manufacturing process.
And it is displacing water that we would otherwise have to buy from the city. I'd love to say I have altruistic intentions, but I must say that the driver initially was the economics. It made economic sense to implement these changes.
The way green infrastructure works and the way it becomes cost-effective is when you balance green infrastructure with other growth and development needs of a city. When you build a green street by itself, it costs $1 million. When you build a green street on top of a sewer relay, where you're already going to have to rebuild the street, the green street portion of it goes down to $300,000. The big time to make the change is when something is being changed already.
Educating the public about managing stormwater includes reaching out to parents, teachers, and students at local schools. With financial help from the Water Department, Greenfield Elementary, in the heart of Philadelphia, was one of the first schools in the city to redesign its schoolyard to prevent stormwater runoff.
The schoolyard was completely all asphalt. There was 2 large green dumpsters that would ooze trash muck on a daily basis. So when it would rain, those pollutants would run into the stormwater system and run out to the Schuylkill River.
My hands are wet.
There's now a play space for kids that actually is a play space and not a parking lot. In addition, the water percolates down through the semi-permeable surface and is diverted by these mounds that allow the water to percolate through instead of running out and into the storm drain and out to the river.
Parents really drove the process, and we were able to team up with the Water Department. They saw us as a good pilot project because we had a motivated group of parents and teachers to set an example for everyone else. The schoolyard now is about 50% porous, including 2 rain gardens and an agriculture zone.
Another beetle grove. Oh, another one.
We also use it as an educational outdoor classroom.
We have 4 beetle groves. That's awesome.
So teachers will bring classes out here to work on various different projects.
When we come out tomorrow, we're going to collect all the samples. We're going to take a good look at what we have.
Once they put the gardens in, we had soil, we had trees, organisms started showing up. We started migrating outside and using all of the gardens as part of the science lab.
Do you eat beetle larvae?
No.
Has 2 legs per body segment, so what's it going to be?
Now that we have the gardens, we just have everything we really need here, and we don't have to go to other places. Now we can just use our own environment as science.
So many small changes we can make have such a large impact. Just by doing a small urban garden, the amount of water you can absorb and then enhance your environment is incredible. So the more awareness we can raise through our kids and through our teachers and our community of what really should be common sense. And sometimes we get stuck in a rut, not realizing that we're accepting something that could easily be changed and improved.
Transforming how a major city manages its stormwater can't be accomplished by one city agency alone. To transform the fabric of a neighborhood, it requires partnerships with grassroots organizations with boots on the ground.
We are a nonprofit that does free critical repairs for low-income homeowners. That includes energy efficiency work, health and safety repairs, and anything critical to a home. But we cluster that work on blocks where we do multiple homes.
Brown Street.
And today our focus is on the stormwater management piece.
Today we are installing downspout planters, and that's a box that goes at the bottom of a downspout, and it manages roof runoff that comes down your downspout, and you can plant it like a regular planter.
I've
learned about sustainability and consumption and all that, and that's a good way to conserve water. And also it looks nice when you put your flowers in there. I want to put mint in mine. Yes, I'm going to make tea, but I'm going to make mojitos also.
The water department has taken a truly grassroots approach to sort of, we'll do it bucket by bucket, house by house.
We absolutely hope that we can educate more people about the environment and stormwater management specifically for the water department. And I think we've been able to build community as well.
Smaller pieces of glass, and we get a container. There's containers.
And we also have a group creating the beginnings of a community garden on a vacant lot.
The garden project was my idea, so I want to just see it all come together. We're going to start with some tomatoes, some lettuce, some peppers, some okra, some beans, and just, look forward to planning for next summer's crop. I think those are going to be flower beds over there.
Our neighbor wants to make this like a garden, and she wants to make this a park for the kids. So I think we're going to kind of we can play back here over here and make the garden over there. So, woo! Mommy can't breathe.
It's going to be wonderful for the children to have something to do. It's going to be wonderful once the vegetables start sprouting, we'll have something to eat. It's going to be wonderful for passersby that we can see the sheer beauty of it all. And it's just a good thing. I'm very happy about it.
Philadelphia is at the beginning of a very long journey with no guarantees of success. But homeowners, businesses, schools, government agencies, and grassroots organizations throughout the city have taken the first steps on a path to creating a sustainable future, believing that green city, clean waters can be an enduring model for Philadelphia and the nation.
People ask whether we can fail at this, and I don't think we can. It's really about changing how a city sees itself, how a city becomes green, how a city becomes sustainable, and that is just too important for us to fail.
We've seen how people in Philadelphia are building a green infrastructure to keep their rivers.
All right. We will now take a visit with our neighbors at the Nassau County Soil and Water Conservation District. We will take a closer look at different pollution solutions that are being implemented throughout the county. From a grassroots volunteer task force to rooftop farms, we will watch how very different projects all aim to achieve the ultimate goal of better water quality.
Stormwater is our enemy. Stormwater is why we're in business. Unfortunately, 80 to 85% of the garbage we pick up out the bay comes from stormwater. Everything that goes down a storm drain is going to eventually end up in the bay, on the South Shore, or the Sound on the North Shore. Every time it rains, I cringe. We average about 150,000 pounds a year picking up, trash, and that's when you think about that in terms of how much does a plastic bottle weigh, does a beer bottle weigh? All these things, they're not heavy objects, and we do pick up. We find tires and we find chunks of wood and big pieces of styrofoam, but a lot of our trash is really small. So to pick up that much trash out here with our 6 boats, that's a lot. Year after Sandy, we picked up 243,000 pounds of garbage. And last year, the first year after that, we picked up about 190-something thousand pounds of garbage. So we're hoping to see less and less of that as the years go by. The environmental impact to having all this debris end up on our salt marshes and bays out here is, one, it'll kill wildlife. We've seen that before. And 2, it'll kill the salt marshes too. We find plastic all over the salt marshes, and the plastic lays on the grass. It burns the grass, and even though we take the plastic off, sometimes the grass doesn't come back. So it's not only killing wildlife, it's killing our precious salt marshes.
Congress adopted many of the great, far-reaching laws that we have today. Of course, I'm referring to the Clean Water Act, the Clean Air Act, the National Environmental Policy Act, and many other laws. And in Congress's grand scheme, EPA would be partners with states and localities to address these pollution problems. For example, the Clean Water Act. EPA will provide funds, technical assistance, guidance to the states that adopt the Clean Water Act permitting program and other programs. So the states are on the ground carrying out these programs. New York State, with all of its diversity, we still suffer from the effects of stormwater wherever we go in the state. You've got rural areas that are impacted by storms in a very big way, and you have our major cities impacted by storms in a very big way. So no matter where you travel in New York State, it can be a problem.
Nassau County has been on the forefront of stormwater management since the 1930s. We've installed a number of green infrastructure components at 2 industrial type facilities in Nassau County, at both the Cedar Creek Water Pollution Control Facility in Wantagh and the Bay Park Sewage Treatment Facility in East Rockaway, where we installed almost like a laundry list of green infrastructure technologies as a way to show other municipalities who have these facilities, as a way to show them these components, how they work and how effective they are.
Operation Splash is a grassroots, all-volunteer organization dedicated to cleaning up all the debris out of the South Shore Estuary Reserve in Nassau and now into Western Suffolk County. Splash's education program, we try to explain what a watershed is to young kids. And we tell them basically if you were to take a pile of dirt and take a cup of water and pour it on top of that pile of dirt, all the water would run down to the side and out to the bottom. And the bottom of the pile of dirt is the bays or the Sound. So any garbage that's on that mountain or in that watershed area is going to come out into the bays or to the Sound. And the kids pick it up like that.
By itself, rainwater is pure and wonderful, but when it picks up our garbage, it's a problem. There are so many people, so many organizations around New York State that are dealing with these issues. It's really hard to name them all. We have the soil and water conservation districts. We have intermunicipal protection committees. For example, the Hempstead Harbor, Manhasset Bay, and Oyster Bay Cold Spring Harbor committees, and the Peconic Intermunicipal Consortium here on Long Island. There are also joint efforts in upstate New York. The DEC has entire programs directed at this, as does the EPA. The Audubon Society, Friends of the Bay here on Long Island. Schools are doing a lot. And also, let's not forget the business community. There are a number of businesses now that are looking at practices, ways that they can provide our communities with practices that can help us deal with this kind of pollution.
Water Wash here in Mattituck is basically a redesigned public boat ramp, which was created to keep stormwater from running directly down the boat ramp into surface water and to give it time to slow down and infiltrate into the ground before it ever reaches Mattituck Creek. The stormwater runs off the road. Essentially, what used to be a dirt drive area has gravel. That gravel driveway slows stormwater down and allows some pollutants to drop out at that level. The stormwater that passes the gravel gets to the porous paving area, and that porous paving area allows more of the stormwater to filter down into the ground. And by filtering down into the ground, the pollutants are kept out of the surface water. And in the event of a very large rainstorm, any water that gets over the filter pavement goes into a natural drainage swale, and that swale retains remaining stormwater, giving it a longer period of time to soak into the ground before it reaches Mattituck Creek. The kind of porous pavement that we use here is a blend of recycled glass materials and a polymer that actually has natural plant materials in it. And it creates essentially a honeycomb, if you will, if you looked at it sort of microscopically. And that honeycomb, those spaces in between the particles of polymer and the particles of the recycled glass, create strength so you can stand on top of it, but porosity so the water can flow through it.
This is the only place on Mattituck Inlet where you can actually see the water. And so it was a good place to demonstrate how the water could enter the inlet in a much more gradated way and not be a sluice way from the stormwater runoff off Route 48. Projects that the community is involved in always are places that are much more cared about. And from a long-term perspective, you want people to care about the place as well as understand the project and what the concepts are that are being used there, because the more they understand it, the more they care about it, the more impact it will have.
So sustainability is about utilizing resources wisely now so that they're available for future generations to use. In developing green infrastructure around stormwater, what we're trying to do is to preserve water quality into the future for New Yorkers. So this is an example of green infrastructure. And green infrastructure is defined as using our plants, soils, and natural environment to try to mitigate the impacts of the development that we see behind us. Here, this is a new LEED certified building that was built on the Hofstra University campus on Long Island. And in doing so, the designers built this low area to collect stormwater running off of that parking lot and storing it here. By putting the water here, we're preventing the pollution and excess water from entering the surface water bodies that surround Long Island.
Porous pavement is one type of green infrastructure, and porous pavement essentially is a hard surface that has the ability to absorb water. When you put water on top of a porous pavement, you still have the hard structure of pavement, but the water goes down through it as opposed to sliding over it. And by retaining that water going down as opposed to over the top, you can hold pollutants back, you can hold sediments back, and you can provide for better water quality protection at the end of the line.
Rain garden is a shallow bowl that we direct water to on purpose. Rain gardens mimic nature. So what we try to do is we have a spot for water to be collected, and then we let that water soak back into the groundwater. If the water soaks in a day or less, it's a rain garden. If the water sits there longer than a day, it's not a rain garden. It's a swamp, a bog, or something else. So then we plant that rain garden with deep-rooted plants. The plants take up that water, soak up that water, use that water, and clean that water almost to drinkable standards within 2 to 3 feet underneath that soil. Most people think that a rain garden is a wet spot, so you want wet plants. It's actually the opposite. You actually want dry plants that can handle some water, not wet plants that can handle drought. The rain garden is only wet when it rains, so it's only wet a small percentage of the time. You want more dry plants that can handle water. Hydrangeas do make a good rain garden plant, as well as black-eyed Susans. and purple coneflowers, a number of trees and shrubs. You can put rain gardens in shade, so that hydrangea for the shade, but also hostas and ferns and things like that work well in the shade, so you can go in either direction. Where you place a rain garden is where is the water flow across your property. The downspout off your house, the sump pump outlet, off the edge of the driveway where the water flows across the grass. Those are all good opportunities to capture that water. So this is a rain garden with the town of Oyster Bay. It's newly planted, so the plants are still growing. There's still some room to grow. How this rain garden works is that we're taking water off of the roadway here, and it falls into this basin where I'm sitting. When the garden starts to fill up with water, the water will soak into the ground and get clean and cool and go to the sound, which is further in the distance. When you get too much rain, when we have too much water in a big storm event, the water goes over the dam and then down the drain and over my right shoulder here.
Green infrastructure works. It helps to reduce pollutants. A series of rain gardens can revitalize communities. People take pride in community gardens. Another example would be a green roof.
Standing in the Brooklyn Navy Yard on the roof of Building 3, which we've converted into a farm. And it's an intensive green roof, which means it has deep soil. We're actually using it as a vegetable farm, so it's unlike most green roofs that you'll see out there. Arugula and other lettuces are kind of our cash crop, I would say. Got some nice sweet and hot peppers here. Everybody loves our hot sauce. We have two farms. We have one in Queens and one in Brooklyn, and between the two farms we produce about 50,000 pounds of vegetables per year. So every year the two farms are really holding back about 1 million or so gallons of water from entering the sewer system. Our green roofs here at Brooklyn Grange are unique because they're intensive green roofs that have been used to grow vegetables. And they're not just ecological facilities, but they're actually businesses where we have economic activity going on. We grow a wide variety of vegetables and herbs. Pretty much everything you can imagine seeing at a farmer's market farm stand, we grow it. So cucumbers are great plants because, like all of the fruiting plants, they have flowers and they feed our pollinators. And over here you can see our beehives, which are making honey for us, while the cucumber plants are making cucumbers, and they have this kind of wonderful symbiotic relationship. A single beehive can produce about 100 pounds of honey in 1 year. So we really love them. They're good for our plants, and they're good for our pocketbooks. Here's some nice basil. It's pesto season. In essence, a green roof just acts like a big sponge. When it rains, the green roof absorbs the storm water, and then the storm water either will slowly trickle down into the drain, or it'll be evaporated up back into the air or absorbed up by the plants. Some of the biggest ecological benefits to green roofs are stormwater capture, heat island effect reduction, so it actually cools the air. We've seen that this roof is about 10 to 20 degrees cooler on a hot day than similar roofs in the area. In order to have a rooftop farm like this, you need a pretty strong roof. The most important thing is to talk to an engineer and make sure that your roof can support the load. And then once you know how much weight your roof can hold, you can design a green roof that fits your building. Maybe it'll have a vegetable garden, maybe it will just have ornamental plants or grasses. A very common green roof system includes sedum, which is a very low maintenance plant. It can survive drought, it can survive heavy rainfall, and it serves a lot of important environmental benefits.
This is a sedum modular tray system green roof. It's challenging to retrofit a green roof. It's much easier to build a building from ground up with the green roof designed so that you can make sure the building roof is structurally strong enough to hold the weight of the medium and the plants. The rain falling on the roof will stay on the roof, and then it drains to the drains, and that rainwater is carrying everything that's on the roof and sending it to the stormwater system. The first step for us was to contact the residents, meet with them, and explain what we're trying to do and why this would be a good project for them. Cooling costs might go down. Apartments that are below the green roof should see electricity bills go down because of green roof's cooling effects on building temperatures. We also talked about having the green roof being good for creating native habitats, Even with the sedum, we might have some beneficial insects that come and maybe reduce the number of mosquitoes that are around. Once we had everything in order and ready to install, the installation itself only took 2 weeks.
Great, so that's the end of our second clip, and thanks to everyone for dealing with the glitchy tech issues of that first video. Unfortunately, we didn't all get to see the full spread of that CSO as it entered the blue water, but both of these videos are available online, and maybe we can drop those links in the chat box if people want to watch more of either one of those. I'm gonna introduce our panelists more fully now, and then we're gonna get talking. First, I want to remind everyone to please put questions that you have into the Q&A box. You can do that now, or you can do that as we start talking. And we're gonna be able to field some of those questions to the panelists. I want to remind our panelists to turn your videos on now, and you can stay muted in case of background noise. But remember to unmute yourselves as you talk. To introduce everyone, we want to welcome Oded Holzinger. He's the Rivers and Trails Program Manager at Groundwork Hudson Valley, a community-based environmental nonprofit in Yonkers, New York. He's an environmental urban planner who focuses on river restoration, public space, community organizing, and climate resiliency. In his words, he believes in cities that weave together all people, infrastructure, and natural wilderness. And he also believes in using GIS and map-based technology to empower vulnerable communities. Rebecca Pryor is the program coordinator with Riverkeeper and Guardians of Flushing Bay. She facilitates and implements a community-based vision of the Flushing waterways. She builds coalitions with the most climate vulnerable voices in the northeastern Queens watershed, and she advocates for healthy and equitably accessible waterways throughout New York City. She studied community-based planning and environmental justice while earning her master's degree in city and regional urban planning at Pratt Institute. And in the past, Rebecca has also led environmental education and recreation programs with the Bronx River Alliance and North Brooklyn Community Boathouse. Emily Vail is the executive director of the Hudson River Watershed Alliance. She spent 8 years before that as the watershed outreach specialist for the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation's Hudson River Estuary Program, which was in collaboration with the New York State Water Resources Institute at Cornell University. And in that role, she worked with community-based watershed groups, municipalities, and other partners to improve water quality. Her research has focused on green infrastructure performance, urban streams, and intersections of art and community engagement. And that research was done during her master's program in natural resources at Cornell University. And I don't know her cat's name, but the cat is also our guest tonight. And finally, MaryJane Shimsky is a lawyer and a historian by training. She was first elected to represent the 12th Legislative District on the Westchester County Board of Legislators in February of 2011. The district comprises the villages of Ardsley, Dobbs Ferry, Hastings-on-Hudson, and Irvington. So right in our Sawmill River watershed and Bronx River watersheds, as well as parts of unincorporated Greenberg. So MaryJane's priorities are infrastructure, environment, and public health, and she is majority whip for the Democratic Caucus and chair of the Committee on Public Works. And she's a member of many other committees, also chair of the Sawmill River Basin Advisory Board and co-chair of the Bronx River Advisory Board. So we're gonna kick off with Rebecca. And Rebecca, the Philly film talked about some big costs for projects, but also for industries to manage their stormwater. And one of the things we wanted to talk about here tonight is what is wrong with the current way that we pay for stormwater management, and how would a different fee structure change that and incentivize green infrastructure?
Yeah, thanks, Jen. So
to answer the question, which is a little bit wonky, I'm going to use some slides to help us and help me help you. So to start out, everyone can see my screen. Jen, I can only see you, so if you can give me a thumbs up.
Yes, and you're a little quiet. Is there some way you can reach your mic?
Yep. How's that? Great. Okay.
But we lost your slides, so bring that back up. Yeah.
Okay.
There you go.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about the system. I will say from the get-go that I'm really focusing on New York City's system. It's different by different municipalities. So this is how New York City pays for stormwater infrastructure and how the water rate structure works. So you should look at your own municipality to figure out how it works where you are. So the system basically is that your water bill consists of 3 different costs. It consists of your water use, which feels straightforward, the impact that you're having to the sewer system, and then the impact that you're having to the stormwater infrastructure system. In New York City, those last 2 costs, the sewer and stormwater, especially the stormwater, are a little bit irrational. It doesn't totally make sense where those numbers came out. So for New York City, your water use, 159% of that cost basically creates that sewer fee that pays for stormwater infrastructure and sewer infrastructure. So 159%, kind of a random number, and we'll see how that kind of plays out in a moment. So what does that pay for? We saw in the film, it pays for gray infrastructure like tanks and tunnels, and then it also will pay for green infrastructure like green roofs and bioswales, etc. So why is this inequitable? That's what Jen just asked me. It basically depends, like the amount of stormwater that you contribute to the system is not really based off the amount of water that you use in your home. And as some examples, I'm going to talk about like a parking lot versus a brownstone. So on the left, we have, say, a big box store parking lot. They're going to use very little water. A parking lot maybe will have 1 toilet and a couple of sinks. However, and so their water bill is going to be fairly low. And then that combined sewage and stormwater fee, because it's based on the water usage, is also going to be fairly low. On the other hand, a brownstone is going to have more toilets, it's going to have more sinks, and therefore its water bill is going to be higher, and the amount it pays towards the sewer and stormwater infrastructure system is also going to be higher. The issue is that the parking lot obviously contributes a lot more stormwater than the brownstone does, but the water rate stays the same, and that contribution is not calculated into the final calculation. Okay, so how do we create a more equitable structure? We take that original equation that we looked at and we really just break it down. We're like, okay, that fee consists of combined sewage and stormwater contribution, and we're going to parse that out, and we're going to say exactly what stormwater contribution means. So NRDC, Riverkeeper, and our partners at Valor Analytics created a stormwater like dashboard tool, and it really is to help municipalities figure out what is this cost of stormwater infrastructure that we're talking about. And built into this tool, you'll see on the far right, is a way to then not only say, okay, how do we like parse out the stormwater fee? It's also how do we incentivize green infrastructure? Because the whole point of doing this is to really not only pay for our stormwater infrastructure and not only make it more equitable, but really just take the burden off of the stormwater infrastructure to begin with. So an aspect of this is really creating a green infrastructure credit program. That's what we saw in Philadelphia in part of the film. And that helps, it's really just a rebate, and it gives money back to the landowner, 50 to 80% of what they're creating on their property to help take some burden off of the stormwater infrastructure system. You'll see here, this is just how the dashboard tool kind of plays this out. And then we can see by land, like land use, the difference that it has on the amount that they pay for stormwater infrastructure. So that just gives you a sense, oops, I've lost you. That just gives you a sense, great. I think I've stopped sharing my screen. Okay, that gives you a sense of kind of the system. Thanks, Jen.
Thanks. And so is that dashboard tool something that everybody can access and look at?
I will put it into the chat now.
Awesome. That's great. I'm sure we'll have lots of wonky fun playing around with that. So MaryJane, we're curious as to whether pressure is being applied in Westchester County, whether that's from county departments or from community residents who know about this and who want green things in their spaces, and where, if it's coming, where is it coming from and where should it be coming from? You got to unmute yourself. You're still on mute.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
We on the Board of Legislators, when we receive capital projects to do repairs and upgrades at our facilities, we generally always ask about what can be done in terms of pervious surfaces, what can be done in terms of landscaping, putting in the right plants for the right place, to work on issues like stormwater management. And I think hearing that over and over again, especially with an administration that has progressive tendencies, is starting to move the conversation a little bit. I do think that it's important for the average person and for various advocacy groups to take an active role, because unlike the city, ownership of everything in Westchester County is so diffuse that even if you were to get a really solid commitment from one level of government, they only control a certain amount of the real estate. So you need to be able to take this to your village hall, to your local planning board members. You need to take it to your zoning boards. You need to take it to your neighbors. And I think that there are programs that we can do. I know we are currently examining our rate structure for our environmental facilities. And ours is based on property value, which also creates certain inequities in places you might not anticipate. If you have very dense housing, that small area may end up paying a lot more in property and in fees for the wastewater than, say, a large place with one mansion on it. So there's a question as to, if we were to change what we do and how we do it, how would the equities work, and would that hurt low and modest income parts of the county? So we're still looking at that. I do find the area, the suggestion of a credit for bringing in green infrastructure to one's property exciting prospect, and I think that's something that we can definitely profit by studying more, and I look forward to taking that back.
Great. So when you said that you're examining the water rate structure, was that the county overall? Who's examining that, and what's the scope?
The scope is the county-wide parts of the sewer system. When I said that everything is basically diffused in Westchester, it's really true. You not only have the pipes under your house, the pipes on your local streets are probably owned and controlled by your municipality at this point. And it's when you get to the major force mains that go down to the wastewater treatment plants. That is what the county generally controls at this point.
So you're talking about the sewer infrastructure specifically too, just to clarify.
And in most parts of Westchester, we do have two sewer systems, although there are still substantial parts of the city of Yonkers that do not. And we occasionally do have problems where when we have a tropical storm or some kind of storm with very heavy rainfall, we can end up with a situation where the system overflows and you end up in sewage. I remember just after the city of Yonkers opened their first daylighted section of the Sawmill River a number of years ago. I think that was Sandy, but everything overflowed and backed up into the daylighted system, and lots of dead fish. The aroma was a cross between rotted fish and Clorox, if you can imagine that. And it took a while to get things cleaned up and functioning properly. So anything we can do, and an incentive system strikes me as being the way that ratepayers would probably find the most friendly to do that. And every little bit helps.
So I just want to make sure it's clear to everyone who's listening that when MaryJane mentioned 2 sewers, what she's talking about is a sewer for sanitary and a sewer for stormwater. And when in most areas, those are separate sewers. So that's what we call separate sewer systems. Those parts of Yonkers that have combined sewer systems, the sanitary goes into the same pipes as the stormwater. And when you have really heavy rainfall, that combined volume overwhelms the capacity of the wastewater treatment plant. And by design, there's a bypass. And so the combination of stormwater and untreated sewage go directly into, in that case, the Hudson River. For different treatment plants, obviously, it depends where they're sited, where their outfalls go. So let's talk about practices a little bit, green infrastructure practices. Emily, in your study of green infrastructure installations in Kingston, upriver a bit, what lessons have been learned about what could have been done differently on a municipal level to avoid some mistakes?
Great, thank you. Yeah, and thanks for having me in this Lower Hudson focused session. And sorry about my cat, Tipatina. She just really needs to be involved in everything and seems to really love green infrastructure. So I'll just give a quick overview of what some of my research was. There she goes. In the city of Kingston, there was a big retrofit project where they took 2 parking lots that were right across the street from each other. They were able to secure grant funding from New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, and they ended up installing 13 different green infrastructure practices across these 2 parking lots. So all of the runoff that's generated over that impervious surface is now treated by either a rain garden, a bioretention area, pervious pavers, or a dry well. So I was looking at the performance of these practices, looking at a quantitative analysis. So I actually had water level sensors in each of the practices and looking at water as it goes up in ponds and then comes back down over the course of a storm. And then I was also looking from a qualitative perspective about things like design, maintenance, just paying really close attention to each practice over time to really understand where we might have some lessons learned. And so what I ended up finding was that in terms of water quantity, these practices work extremely well. The site conditions are really well suited to green infrastructure. The soils really promote infiltration, and they successfully infiltrate all of the runoff that's generated at that site. So they're completely disconnected from the storm sewer system at that point. In terms of the qualitative assessment, there were a lot of really interesting lessons learned, including things like making sure that at the design stage, pedestrians are considered, making sure that appropriate vegetation is used in different practices. I go into a lot of detail in a talk. I'm actually going to just put in the chat a recording to a talk that I gave this morning on my research. So if you're really interested in some of the gritty details, I'm happy to share that. And thinking too about maintenance and making sure that, again, at the design stage, that maintenance is considered so that whatever you put into the ground can be cared for, because these are dynamic practices. They change over time. Things may happen that you're not expecting. And so we need to have some level of adaptive maintenance to make sure they continue to function. So I'm excited to say that in the city of Kingston, I'm working with the city as part of a project advisory committee to help share some of these lessons learned, and they're actively installing some new parking lots with more green infrastructure. So we have an opportunity to directly inform that process. So as part of that, they've gathered a stakeholder group with local businesses, local environmental experts. And so one of the big lessons learned was the importance of bringing those voices to the table. And I'm excited to share that it's happening. So I think that's a really good model.
Thank you. That's a great segue into a question that I have for Oded, because, talking about voices at the table. So Groundwork is working on urban stormwater modeling with the new school, and your model is analyzing flooding, heat, and other factors, and you're trying to determine where to put green infrastructure. I know there's a lot more to the project than that. So can you talk about how your NGO is using this modeling work to have more green infrastructure happen in the municipality of Yonkers?
Yes, thank you. So first, I want to also acknowledge Pablo Herrera-Cantes, who's also a guest here tuning in, who we partnered with. He's from the New School Urban Systems Lab, and he's been developing this very special modeling, stormwater modeling tool that we are using as part of our Climate Safe Neighborhoods Yonkers project. So I'm going to share my screen and just run through this so I can give you all the context and show you the model itself. So our Climate Safe Neighborhoods project is, as you mentioned, Jen, we are using GIS tools to examine the relationship between historic redlining policy, impervious surface, tree canopy, heat and flooding. All of these things, as I'm sure everyone here understand, are very much connected to one another. And we identified that those federal policies from back in the 20th century have a huge impact on where there are trees, where there aren't trees, impervious surface, and essentially where you get extreme heat and extreme flooding. So when we talk about flooding, here you see the Fema Flood Map, and you can see how along the Bronx River, for instance, those green lined and yellow lined neighborhoods would usually be the less dense and the more permeable areas. But when you look at the Sawmill River right here, it's running through those areas that were red line. And today those areas are a lot more dense, impervious, and you wouldn't find a lot of trees there. So that's where you get those high temperatures, and with extreme runoff and extreme rain events, that's where you'll end up getting flooding, as well as high velocities on slope sides in a hilly city like Yonkers. So this is from Pablo's presentation of the model. I'm just going to share a few slides from it to explain the model. And this is from the city of Syracuse. We're still working to develop the model for Yonkers. And maybe before I go into the model, I'll just mention that as part of our Climate Safe Neighborhoods project, we bring together community. We use the GIS tools to identify the most vulnerable communities. Then we work to organize those communities and set up a Yonkers Climate Resiliency Task Force. And then we bring that task force together with our academic partners from the New School, as well as from Portland State University, to the decision-making table, whether that is the Yonkers Department of Planning or City Council. And so one of the main things we want to do is find ways to incentivize decision makers to think about climate change adaptation for these vulnerable communities. And this model really allows us to show it to them, especially when implementing green infrastructure is not always at the top of the priorities for municipalities like Yonkers. So what you see here is taken from the model that Pablo and the Urban Systems Lab developed for the city of Syracuse. And what the modeling tool essentially gives you is the ability to run simulations of different rain events. So whether it's once every 10 years, once every 100 years, once every 50 years, whatever you choose. And it will show you where runoff is expected to accumulate, taking into account the topography as well as the land cover. So where you'll have roads, you can see those are the more impervious areas, you're likely to see accumulation of runoff. And in simpler words, we're talking about where you expected in a storm that will come once every 10 years, where you expected to see big puddles that will challenge the stormwater drainage system as well. And then next, the second element of the modeling work is also where you can intervene and how you can intervene. So we expected capacity of water retainage for each type of green infrastructure tool is, and we can use it to think about where do we want to remove the first inch of runoff, as well as where it will impact. What is the area that will be impacted by this specific intervention, specific green infrastructure? And when we are able to show that to the city, to the planning department, to the engineering department, we can build trust with them for how beneficial this could be for a certain area, when sometimes there is doubt in those tools. Now, there is another question that comes up here, which is for each municipality, for each city, what is the most desired benefit? Because some municipalities would like to prioritize the highest property value, for example, and prevent flooding there. Others would like to prioritize roadways and major transportational infrastructure. In the case of the work that we're doing, which has a strong environmental justice element, as I mentioned, we're working to identify the most vulnerable communities. And so we're looking at level of poverty, density, how many people will essentially be impacted by it. Now, in the case of Yonkers and many other post-industrial cities, oftentimes those things will work together. For example, in Yonkers, those areas that were redlined back in the days that are home to the most vulnerable populations would usually also be where major throughways and transportation channels will go through. Like in the case of Yonkers is the neighborhood of Getty Square with a lot of vulnerable residents, as well as major throughways leading to the downtown area. So you can get the dual benefit there. Now I want to go back to this slide to show another great benefit of using this tool, which is understanding, again, especially with a topography like the city of Yonkers, whether you implement green infrastructure in the lower areas where runoff is expected to accumulate will have some effect. But if you find the source of that puddle, the source of this runoff accumulation, and that could be whether it's the slope side where runoff will get channelized through the lower areas until it hits that low point, or when it comes to the ground cover, we're talking about the most impervious surfaces that might become those channels. So roads would oftentimes, that's where you'll get those channelized streams of runoff. So if you implement green infrastructure, if you put a bioswale or a rain garden there, you might remove that first inch of water or the first hour of runoff and impact a much greater area. And so this really helps us guide the city to where we will get the best impact for the specific criteria that we would like to look at for reducing the risk of flooding and the impact of flooding on the community.
That's great. Thank you, Oded. So I think we've got some audience questions that Christian's gonna to bring in here for panel to answer.
I sure do. And thank you to all the panelists for sharing your knowledge and expertise. So now we're going to give the audience a chance to pick your brains. I may direct some of these questions to specific panelists, or I may just throw them out there. And if you want, just feel free to answer it if you think you know the answer. So the first question that I see here is, which do you think is most needed for traction in how New York City reaches its goals? Public engagement, private business, or total municipal management? Anybody can answer that big old question, or part of it. And if you need me to repeat it, I can repeat it.
Yeah, I don't. Thank you though. Yeah, I think so. It's hard for me, honestly, to think in sort of silos like that. I think all of these things are really useful. You know, like obviously total municipal management takes out public engagement and private business, but I think having those three things kind of working in tandem with each other is critical, and is actually, to me, the most important thing is that those three things actually do work in tandem together. And when they do start working in silos, that's often where you run into issues. So to get more like concrete about it, the green infrastructure incentives that came out of Philadelphia and were directed toward both, we saw in the film, both toward privately owned homes and toward that public engagement and effort and toward that sort of educational piece. And then those that were directed more towards businesses, new development, the green roof that we saw Shino on, and talking about how it's so important for new development to actually incorporate those green roofs early on, because they can withstand the weight of the building and they can incorporate it into their design, is critical. And none of that would be possible without the municipality kind of playing its role. So I really think the work in tandem is key, and it's difficult to siphon it out.
And you agree that would work as well in Westchester County, in addition to New York City? Awesome.
Yes.
Cool. Thanks. Okay, next question I see here is it still illegal in Westchester for homeowners to reuse gray water for toilet flushing and outdoor uses? And aside from just catching rainwater, couldn't we encourage the reuse of gray water through an in-house system? What laws would have to be implemented / changed? This may be for MaryJane Shimsky.
The short answer is, I don't know. I know that when we were first starting to talk about many of these issues, the concept of gray water was brought up, but it didn't really seem to have the kind of traction that rainwater did and plants and so on. I think we may have one or two people from our planning department on. If they are on and they know the answer to the question, I am not proud. You can put it in the chat. And while I'm here, I just want to shout out for a minute that our planning department, which is largely responsible for design and capital projects involving riverbank stabilization and such, have done some really good projects incorporating a lot of the kinds of techniques that we've been talking about tonight. I think that sometimes things do get siloed in a large government, and I would like to see a little bit more cross-disciplinary working on some of this.
Thank you for that answer. The next question that I see here is it feasible to replace all wastewater management and stormwater discharge systems from CSOs to MS4s? How much do MS4 systems improve discharge issues? And is it reasonable Is it a reasonable improvement for cities in the future, particularly in large cities such as New York City, to do that conversion? That is a huge question. I would pass it to Emily.
I can take it. Sorry, this cat. So thanks everyone for your patience. So with the combined sewer system that Jen described, right, where you have the raw sewage that mixes with the storm sewer, most cities that have those kinds of sewer systems are under consent orders to change those out. And so New York City, City of Kingston here, and even Syracuse that Oded mentioned, these are all cities that are actively working on reducing their sewage overflows. And in many cases, they're doing that either through green infrastructure or separating storm sewers. There's a big project here in Kingston that they're working on related to that. And so that is the goal, is to shift those systems away from that combined model and into more of a separated storm model, which is that MS4, the municipal separate storm sewer system. That solves certain problems, like having raw sewage overflow into our water bodies, but it adds other problems because we have flashier systems, we have streams that are receiving water faster that also are carrying pollutants, like we saw with many of those videos. So there's water quality and quantity issues. And so green infrastructure practices can be used in either of those contexts to help slow down the flow of water, to help filter out certain pollutants. And so they can be a really good choice, you know, whether you have a CSO or an MS4. And I lost the last part of the question. How much do municipal, right, so sorry, just taking a cheat look. So I think that is a really important step. There's major water quality benefits to doing that, but that's not going to solve the problem outright. There's other steps to be taken.
Thank you so much for that comprehensive answer. Next question. This person, oh, that question just disappeared. Okay.
No, okay. So the next question really just is stormwater fees, and go.
So there was one question from the audience where they were talking about the difference between New York City and Philadelphia. And you know, Philadelphia, as we saw, has fees. New York City, we don't think has fees. Can any of you explain those discrepancies and how we move into some kind of structured rate system?
Sure. Yeah, I think, so I think that there are a few ways to do it. The thing that I actually linked in the chat earlier, and I can put it into the chat again, is a stormwater dashboard tool that actually helps municipalities figure out how to do exactly that, how to incorporate a stormwater fee into the system and how to do it in such a way that doesn't actually overburden sort of more vulnerable groups more than another. So for example, when we first were kind of doing research around this stormwater rate system and how to restructure it, there's a lot of burden that was placed on single family homes, and there was a lot of fear around what the impact would be to single family homes. And so part of what the stormwater dashboard tool does is it figures out, okay, well, if you base your system off of impervious surface, which is kind of the most common sense way to do it, you know, if you base it off of how much impervious surface an area or a property has, and then have the stormwater rate kind of match onto that in a ratio, that actually puts more burden onto single family homes. And so another way to do it is based on land use. And by basing it off of your land use, then things can kind of like shake out a little bit more evenly, is what we found in this analysis. One example that you can see is it actually puts somewhat more of a burden onto what's labeled as parks, but that's because what's labeled as parks also covers as amusement parks and fairgrounds and things that actually have these large impervious surfaces. So there's various ways that you can figure out this model, and it really is a municipality by municipality system. It has a lot to do with what kind of housing stock you have and how that's gonna sort of impact your users. But to make things more equitable, another way to factor things in is to have a program that can offset some of the costs for low-income housing homeowners, and again, green infrastructure incentives to really help people out.
Does anyone else want to take that, or is that it's a pretty solid answer?
I suspect that if you make a list of the values that you have when you're designing a system like that, I suspect that no one system is going to check off all the boxes. And the trick is which ones are the most problematic in your community, and also seeing if there may be other incentives you can use to help ease the pain.
Awesome. I'm going to throw out just a couple more because we are running a little late, but these are some great questions from the audience. Thank you so much for being super engaged and throwing out some pretty hefty questions. This one is sort of in line with the stormwater fee topic. In an area like Westchester, where water is not expensive or in short supply, what is the incentive? Would a more equitable stormwater fee be able to be implemented at a municipal level?
You want me to say something?
Maybe.
Okay. At the present time, we are currently doing a study, a feasibility study for consolidation of all of our local sewer systems. And as part of that, the conversation is being drawn to the issues of what rate structures and equities and so on. And it'll probably be another year and a half before we get some really solid answers on these. But at this point, people are starting to think about it. And I'm probably going to take down Rebecca's contact information because I suspect she probably has a pretty good sized list of what all the alternatives are.
Great, thank you so much. So just in the interest of time, I think we should wrap up, but can I ask the panelists if you would be comfortable sharing your contact information with the attendees in case they want to follow up with any of you on burning questions that we didn't get to address today. Is that okay? Awesome. So for any of the attendants who really wanted their question answered that we didn't quite get to tonight, please look forward to getting in contact with our awesome panelists. And thank you so much again for attending our event tonight. It really means so much that everybody came out. I'm just going to pass this back over to Katie Lamboy. She's going to help us, or she's going to send us off tonight.
Sure. We thank you all for your time in supporting our efforts to educate and engage watershed communities. Please be on the lookout for a follow-up email with additional resources and information about the Lower Hudson Partnership. Have a wonderful rest of your evening.